Hey, we're live. And so you've heard a few things I've said. And I'm just watching the news here and watching CNN and MSNBC and Fox. And I think I've told you the story of the women who came from the Ukraine and told us I was running a church action coalition in Roanoke. Oh, about 3 months before Donnie came down the escalator. Anyway, they came and said that Ukraine had always been a place, especially where they lived, which was Odessa, where, no matter who Ukraine people were constantly going in and out. The Romans, the Nazis, the commies, you name it. They were always being conquered. And because they would like the breadbasket of whoever empire they were being conquered from. And they were a good example of kind of what that is all about, And what that is all about is empires can only exist when they are based on taking other people's stuff. And the United States was, started with Christopher Columbus taking other people's stuff. He came here, he almost died on his way here, but he was so incompetent. The Indians in the Caribbean came and got him and nursed him back to health. And he said, boy, these people are really great. They're really generous. They're really smart. They're really healthy. They'll make great slaves, And they didn't know war. They had conflicts, but not war like the Europeans had. So when he came back 2 years later, he brought 1,000 soldiers with 1,000 muskets and 100 pieces of cannon, and he took over Haiti and made it hell on earth. There were 3 million people within 10 years. They were all dead. And that was the beginning of what North, South, and Central America had to experience from Europeans, because the Europeans were an imperial force. Didn't matter who they were, French, the you know, you know the Belgian Congo. Leopold was supposed to be such a great guy, but man, he killed 40 million folk and just took them over, and monetized everything about him. Brought 300 back to his country and made a whole big little museum about him and kept all those people in jail so the Europeans could come and see what those Africans look like, So we're at this amazing turning point, And what can we do, right? What can we do? And the thing is, we need to create community, right? And everything I've ever done, because I've always lived in community, I kind of, so here, these folks right here, this was an Aboriginal tribe I lived with. See where my thumb is? That's me being Mr. Apologist. And my dingo dog is right down there trying to drag me into Dreamtime. And this group of people was in 1973, the Australian government went into their land that had been basically, before the white man showed up there, they had 18 feet of black topsoil. Australia could have fed the world, but the English brought sheep and cattle. And they had these big monsoons, like clockwork. They come right through like the train does. And the cows and sheep would eat the grass down to the ground, and then the water would come, and because there was nothing there to hold it there, would wash the topsoil away. And after 120 years of that, that's why this area called the Nookenbah, and exactly where they live, Christmas Creek, was turned into desert. But when they found uridium, cobalt, uranium, and gold on their little piece of parched land, which these guys didn't even think about, they came in and they didn't say, "Oh, listen, we're gonna like put you someplace else. Oh, we're gonna give you some money. We'll take care of you." Oh, no, they came in and put guns to their heads and blew their brains out. And they knew nobody was out there. The the birds would eat their bones, and but these folk were out picking berries that day, right? And the woman with the baby, she was a little girl when it happened. So these folks were like, shuffled off to a corner of the property where there was nothing on it, and the little girl was taken to Adelaide to be educated. And she became a nurse, and she didn't like white people, so she came back to be the nurse for the last of her tribe. And when we got there, she's about 30 so, and she basically, see that little baby? There was no one to inseminate her. I was the woman, this photograph was taken by my wife, Donna Ann McAdams, and we were there. And that woman had that baby without insemination. Now, you look at that baby, it's not the greatest of pictures, but that baby is about 4 months old. And look what that baby has around its head, a halo. That baby was Jesus Christ. And Jesus never dies. Jesus isn't God's son. We're all God's son, right? And who is God? Nothing, close to what any religion is consenting to what God is. God is a force, God is like, as I was talking earlier about the ether and dark matter, God is the unknown. That makes everything work. And it could be, I'm not smart enough to even theologically go there, right? What I am is your griot, the storyteller. And so that little child was born. By the time he was 6 months, he was running around, and he could bring things back to life. We stayed there another few months, and we had other things to do, which we went on to do. And I heard later on that this kid at 18 had become an Aboriginal leader and an inspirational type of individual. And he was assassinated. And that's what happens to most people who become inspirational, especially if they are lone wolves off on their own. So you're saying, so here's Jesus, and he couldn't change it, but he did. And so can you, in every day and every way, if you can touch people's hearts. And so that was quite fun in Australia, the 3 years. I was there when the Queen showed up, and she basically got very upset with everyone because they wouldn't, kiss her ass, so she left town and declared martial law. Australia's had martial law a number of times. Every time the Labor Party tries to, take over the country. There's me. Oh, let's see. This is, let's see. See, it's hard to do this. These are pictures. I lived on a horse farm in Pennsylvania. This is North Carolina, down below. Blue Ridge Mountains. Oh, this was my chorus. I always have a chorus of sisters who, enjoy my company, enjoy their company, aren't jealous, love to share, and that we're doing something of a cultural nature. These girls were definitely, and this was in Asheville, North Carolina, before Asheville became the hipster jungle, and Asheville was really a great place back in the day. There's my dad, and there's me getting heavy. Right, let's see. I actually got another 120 pounds bigger than that. Rotate. Oh, I keep trying to rotate. Anyway, let's see. There's my mom and my I don't even know. Let's see. That's my brother. There's my bro. I have to figure out how to. So this was sad. this was Asheville, and Asheville used to be one of the largest, if not the largest. There were more plants. No, I don't want to stop. Okay. I was just trying to figure out how to do this. Okay, so this was Asheville. And there was a man who was an amazing. There were more plants in North Carolina and the Blue Ridge Mountains to kill and cure every disease known to man. And the indigenous folk knew this, and this herbalist knew it, and he had a great herbal industry there and from the 1890s till he died in the 30s. And he left all his properties to the city he wanted the city to, take care of things. And he wanted his college, his herbal college, to keep going. So he planted medicinal herbs all through the city so the people of the city of Asheville could cure themselves. They had a school to teach them how to do it. And the state took all the property and bulldozed it under the ground and turned it into condos. And they took his school and turned it into UNCA, which is just a hipster college. And they left a little garden in his honor. How nice, right? And there were a number of us who tried to fight this, but this is one of the problems of organizing. There was this teacher at UNCA. She was the environmental teacher, and she took it upon herself to be do it all herself. And the problem was she burned herself out, and the powers that be just waited a year. And once she died, because she just stressed herself out, they went and bulldozed everything, and without anyone really complaining. There was this one, and this is what they're called agent provocateur. So this guy called Red, and he went in there and he tied himself down to a bulldozer and made a big brouhaha for a couple of days, and then left town. After everyone said, "Okay, he's going to take care of it," and he didn't. That's another part of my chorus. And so we did we did theater, we did murals everywhere, we did guerrilla art everywhere, which was very easy to do in Asheville because there was nobody there, and I knew the police chief pretty well. And he thought, man, it's better than, the gangs or the drugs or any of the above. Anyway, I was getting pretty big in these days. By this time, I was close to 300 pounds. There's my mom. So I took care of my parents the last 20 years of their life. Yeah, she was all right. Here is a friend of mine, Monica, getting married. And my dad kind of just stumbling through stuff. You get old, it's tough, and you think, oh, I'm going to save all this money. Oh, and this was, what's this guy's name? Howard. What was Howard's name? Well, he was a minister, and he bought some really nice properties in Asheville when they were for nothing. And he bought this really beautiful house that had a fire. Half of it was burned, and the other half looked like this. And he built a Playboy grotto in the basement. We had some serious parties, and that's the kind of preacher I like, who openly parties till it's 1999, and every nickel he raised, he gave to people, and anybody who needed a place to stay, he put them someplace. And he was not a hypocrite. He was a righteous guy. What are these? I'm looking at everything backwards. Oh, more of Howard's house. I mean, it was truly an amazing place. Okay. And 1989 was, but it was better. The 80s were much more interesting. I was in New York City in the 80s. And the 50s gave birth to the 60s. The 60s weren't the wild and crazy time. The 70s were the wild and crazy time. And the 80s was, we had a great, person to go up against in what's his name, Ronald Reagan, and but he was just a robot. So we were all doing some pretty amazing things, and this was like the end of it all when Monica had to be a princess, and she lived, hand to mouth until her parents died and gave her $3 million, and then her hubby, who she married, also. So they had 6 million bucks, and in the '90s, they went through 6 million bucks. I mean, it was unbelievable. So why I'm showing you these pictures is that you can do amazing things and still have a good time. And in fact, you need to have a good time. Here's the girls again. Now, these girls know how to have a good time. And I lived out in the forests along the river. And I did have a little apartment in town, and I had a loft. I had a 5,000 square foot loft that had been, this is the paper mill. Oh man, this thing was seriously killing everything. And the woman who did all the research on it, basically they gave her, you either move to Atlanta and we give you a 6-figure salary to work for us, or, you're going to end up dead. So she left town. It's hard not to take that kind of that deal, And so these guys, the paper mill company, Cargill, got a EPA sweet deal. They got 20 years to clean things up, and they got $1 billion worth of taxpayers' money to do it. And the day the 20 years were up, they sold the paper mill to the workers who thought, "Oh, we're gonna run our own paper mill. We'll know how to do it." Well, they left a toxic waste dump. They didn't. They took the Cargill put the money in their pocket and left the workers holding the bag. So, and so this stuff is not like you don't know it's coming. And Donnie got put as president. He didn't win. He was inaugurated. He was stuck there. The corporate world put him there. And let's see what's going on in about 5-10 years. Let's see. Now, this kid was amazing, really brilliant, had a full scholarship. He played music like Ray Charles, and just because he was a smart, good-looking black guy who was going in the right direction. He wasn't a basketball player. He was going to be a lawyer. Man, he got railroaded like you couldn't believe. Became homeless. Just like the kid who was Jesus and got shot at 17. Let's see. That's a coffee shop my buddy ran from New York. I told him about it and came down and bought a bunch of buildings. He couldn't believe he could buy half of downtown for nothing. And then he started a really great coffee shop. And down the street, I had my loft. We used to have these wild parties. That's what these pictures are. And they were kind of reflections of what I did in New York City in the 80s. New York City was a lot bigger, so, but we had great times. And the handful of us who did that basically gave birth to the Asheville of today, the hipster, arty, whoop-de-doo kind of place that we revisited what Asheville was in the 20s, which was the Paris of the South. And now, because there's so many people there, if you drink the water, 30,000 people in Asheville die of just drinking the water. But folks, this is almost every city in America, because the infrastructure of our sewage and water is so decimated, and Flint is a good example, but those were black folk and they had no money, so it didn't matter. But you go to any city where there is the poverty, and their environment is the worst. Or conversely, you go to where the richest people are, and those people are morons. And there's a place in Virginia, in the city, that had been a toxic waste dump, a really nasty toxic waste dump, because it was remnants of World War II, where no one cared. Just do it. We need this. We need that. Let's do it. Like you go to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, or you go up to Hannaford. Woo-wee! So, I mean, I worked at Los Alamos, Sandias, Kirkland Air Force Base, right? I worked for a high voltage company, and I specialized in making exotic transformers, power sources that weren't only variable voltage, but frequency and harmonic. And because I was skilled at scalar technology, I could make these power supplies as scalar amplifiers. So, as my grandma always told me, never work for anybody who doesn't need you more than you need them. So I was like, allowed, I probably was, how old? 71. So I was, 20 to 23 when I did that. And so I saw a lot of stuff. I saw a lot of underground communities. I saw a lot of exotic technologies that I would say at that time were 4,000 or 5,000 years ahead of where we are today. And our government, or not, see, our government, when people talk about our government, no, you have to realize that we don't have a government. We have a organized crime junta, and we have had it since Christopher Columbus. And we have been your basic empire of expansion. First the Indians in the Northeast, and then Canada, and then this, mid-Atlantic, and then we had the Civil War, because who brought the slaves? First, slaves didn't come from Africa to America. They were first brought from America to Europe. And the guy to get the Europeans realizing that this was a great business model was Christopher Columbus's son. And he helped bring in the Dutch West Indies Company. I mean, he was dead by the time it got started. But he got it started, and and people go, wow, that was Africans sold the black people to, no. It was just, a page out of the Romans playbook. The Romans, how they expanded their empire, they would cruise into a neighborhood they wanted to conquer, and they would put their big army up on the ridge, right, in the cities down below, and go to the king and say, see that army? We want you to become a partner in our business, right? Now, if you do that, that army will be your army, and you can do whatever you want with it. Kill all your enemies, all the people you want to control, not a problem. Plus, we'll give you roads and schools and health and water and all kinds of groovy things to make your empire grow. You're doing pretty good at growing that stuff, but we'll make it grow better. And we'll give you other crops to put in their place. And all we ask is our cut. And that's what happened to the rest of the world, and where we are today, because the rest of the world is addicted to comfort, right? It's addicted to the way things are. And here, have a listen to this.
Chris Hedges, and this is Alternative Radio. I'm David Barsamian. This edition of AR features Chris Hedges on stopping fascism. One dictionary defines fascism as a system of government that exercises a dictatorship of the extreme right, typically through the merging of state and business leadership, together with belligerent nationalism. The first fascist party was founded by Mussolini in Italy in 1915. Its etymology is traced to the Latin word meaning a bundle of rods tied around an axe, an ancient Roman symbol of authority. Today, the term for many immediately conjures up horrific images of stormtroopers. But contemporary fascism has undergone a major wardrobe change. Could it happen here? Some see elements of it now with what is called populism, America First, coupled with a largely imagined past, Make America Great Again. The media are used as the enemy of the people, a phrase Stalin used. Critics of the leader are bullied and insulted. Our guest today is Chris Hedges. He's an award-winning journalist who has covered wars in the Balkans, the Middle East, and Central. He spoke at the Aladdin Theater in Portland, Oregon, in a benefit for KBOO Community Radio. And now, Chris Hedges on Stopping Fascism.
The decision by the deep state in ancient Rome, like the United States in 2017, dominated by a bloated military and corrupt oligarchy, to strangle the Emperor Commodus in his bath in the year 192, did not halt the growing chaos and precipitous decline of the Roman Empire. Commodus, like a number of other late Roman empires, and like Donald Trump,
Meditate with me,
was incompetent
breathe deep,
and consumed by his own vanity.
Co-creation.
He commissioned innumerable statues of himself as Hercules and had little interest in governance. He used his position as head of state to make himself the star of his own ongoing public show. He fought victoriously as a gladiator in the arena in fixed bouts. Power for Commodus, as it is for Trump, was primarily about catering to his bottomless narcissism, hedonism, and lust for wealth. He sold public offices so the ancient equivalents of Betsy DeVos and Steve Mnuchin could orchestrate a vast kleptocracy. Commodus was replaced by the reformer Pertinax, the Bernie Sanders of his day, who attempted to curb the unchecked power of the Praetorian Guards, the ancient version of the military-industrial complex. This effort saw the Praetorian Guards assassinate Pertinax after 3 months in office. The Guards then auctioned off the office of emperor to the highest bidder. The next emperor, Didius Julianus, lasted 66 days. There would be 5 emperors in 193 AD, the year after the assassination of Commodus. Trump and our decaying empire have ominous historical precedents. If the deep state replaces Trump, whose ineptitude and imbecility are embarrassing to the empire, that action will not restore our democracy any more than replacing Commodus restored the Republic to Rome. The choice is between inept fascists like Trump and competent fascists like Pence. Our republic is dead. The idiots seen in the decay and chance for personal advancement and profit
In the Hunger Games.
take over in the final days of crumbling civilizations. Idiot generals wage endless, unwinnable wars that bankrupt the nation. Idiot economists call for reducing taxes for the rich and cutting social service programs for the poor, and project economic growth on the basis of myth. Idiot industrialists poison the water, the soil, and the air, slash jobs, and depress wages. Idiot bankers gamble on self-created financial bubbles and impose crippling debt peonage on the citizens. Idiot journalists and public intellectuals pretend despotism is democracy. Idiot intelligence operatives orchestrate the overthrowing of foreign governments to create lawless enclaves that give rise to enraged fanatics. And idiot professors, experts, and specialists busy themselves with unintelligible jargon and arcane theory that buttress the policies of the rulers. Idiot entertainers and producers create lurid spectacles of sex, gore, and fantasy. There is a familiar checklist for extinction. We are ticking off every item on it. The idiots know only one word: more. They are unencumbered by common sense. They hoard wealth and resources until workers cannot make a living and the infrastructure collapses. They live in privileged compounds where they eat chocolate cake and order missile strikes. They see the state as a projection of their own vanity. The Roman, Mayan, French, Habsburg, Ottoman, Romanov, Wilhelmine, Pahlavi, and Soviet dynasties crumbled because the whims and obsessions of ruling idiots were long. Trump is the face of our collective idiocy. He is what lies behind the mask of our professed civility and rationality, a sputtering, narcissistic, bloodthirsty megalomaniac. This face in the past was hidden, at least to most white Americans. But with the destruction of democratic institutions and the disempowerment of the citizen, the oligarchs and the kleptocrats have become brazen. They no longer need to pretend. They steal and lie openly. They wield armies and fleets against the wretched of the earth, blithely ignore the looming catastrophe caused by global warming, and cannibalize the nation, while at night, like some monster from the Grand Guignol, the idiot-in-chief, overseeing our self-immolation, sits slack-jawed in front of a television set before opening his beautiful Twitter account. Forget the firing of James Comey. Forget the paralysis in Congress. Forget the inanity of a press that covers our descent into tyranny as if it were a sports contest between corporate Republicans and corporate Democrats or a reality show starring our maniacal president. Forget the noise. The crisis we face is not embodied in the public images of the politicians that run our dysfunctional government. The crisis we face is the result of a 4-decade-long, slow-motion corporate coup d'etat that has left corporations and the war machine omnipotent, turned our electoral system into legalized bribery, and elevated public figures who master the arts of entertainment and artifice. Trump is the symptom. He is not the disease. Our descent into despotism began with the pardoning of Richard Nixon,
Thank you, buddy.
all of whose impeachable crimes are now legal. And the extrajudicial assault, including targeted assassinations and imprisonment, carried out on dissidents and radicals, especially black radicals.
We can come
This
together.
assault, done in the name of law and order, put the organs of internal security, from the FBI to Homeland Security, beyond the reach of the law. It began
we have to make an
funded
alternative
foundations and
aesthetic.
organizations that took
I've
control
spent
of
the
the press,
last 50
the
years
courts,
of my
the
life
universities,
working on it.
scientific
First,
research,
being
and
an
the two
engineer,
major
thought
political parties.
technologically.
It began with empowering
and
militarized police to
went
kill
into
unarmed
institutions
citizens
that
and
had
the
the
spread of a
resources.
horrendous system of
And I
mass
saw that we
incarceration
had the
and the death
access
penalty.
to
It
unlimited
began with the
free
stripping away of
energy,
our most basic
unlimited free
constitutional
food,
rights.
unlimited
Privacy,
anything
due
you want,
process,
everything you saw in
habeas
Star Trek on
corpus,
TV
fair
in the
elections,
60s, the
and dissent.
replicator. That was real.
It began when
Everything
big
on
money
it
was employed by
real.
political operatives such as Roger Stone.
Okay, I'm back. That's enough of Chris. Chris can go on and on and on. He's great. He's brilliant. He's a great guy. His heart is really good. And there are a lot of people out there who are like howling out the moon because they do not come together. You know, they see it as they have to be the hero. You know, I'm not the hero. I'm the griot. I'm the storyteller. I got plenty of pictures, plenty of stories to tell you that, back in 1980, came back from Australia in 1980. And New York City, my loft was still there. Things were still there for me. But man, New York City changed. And Ronald Reagan had become president. And all of the things that we did in the 70s no longer worked. So poverty was unbelievable. Crime, crack, it was all, the perfect storm. And, the statistics, I'm a statistic guy, statistics of today's crime is a tenth of what it was in the 80s. And Bill Clinton did more to ruin America than any other president because he basically changed the criminal justice system to go after poor and disenfranchised and people of color and women. I mean, look what he did, right? It's not just a cigar. So, and he got away with it. He broke the moral backbone. But, who put him there but good old George H. You have to realize that Billy Bob and Hillary both came from very dysfunctional families. Billy Bob grew up in a brothel, right? He said his mother was a nurse, but it was a brothel. That's why he was so stuck on sex. And Hillary's daddy was, drove a beer truck, basically, and he was in it. And both of these guys, as kids, were smarter than anybody else, and they were basically sold into slavery themselves to the entities of, like the CFR and the Trilateral Commission and all of that crew. And the problem with guys like Chris is like I said, he's got a great heart, but he does come from a Catholic, scholastic point of view, which is okay for about as much as I played for you of him, because he does have the history down from that context, but he doesn't go all the way to where this is coming from. And that we have to realize that humans aren't what we think we are. We are somebody's lab rat. We are somebody's toy. We are somebody's entertainment. Because if we had been let alone, as we think we are, free will, we would have toasted ourselves a long time ago, especially between 1948 and 2000. I mean, there were hundreds of times when the button was pushed and the bombs didn't destroy it. And it only takes, all you need to throw our planet into a nuclear winter is about 100 well-placed Hiroshima-type bombs. Now, the smallest, that was, 20,000 tons. of TNT, but now aren't just kilotons, thousands of tons. They're megatons, millions of tons. And the smallest weapon we have, now, during the Cold War with the Russians, we had each had 60,000, which was forget about it. But just 100 of those 1 megaton weapons detonated, just 100 of them detonated around the world, would throw our planet into what the U.S. Defense Department laughingly calls a nuclear fall. Wouldn't kill everybody. It would cause, the sunlight getting into our atmosphere to be cut by 60%, and the growing of crops would drop by 90%. But not everybody would die. Yes, all those rich people down underground would still survive, and a few above. And any of you had seen the latest version of Time Machine by H.G. Wells. That was done, I think, in the late 90s, early O's. And the guy makes a machine to try and save his wife because she gets mugged and killed. And you can't change what happens. So he, goes into the future to see what the future is going to be like. And he sees there, wow, look at this, look at that. And, it's always where his machine was. I mean, he can't drag his machine around, but he stays in the same place. But he kind of, something conks him on the head, and he hits, the throttle full speed ahead, and he goes 4,000 or 5,000 years in the future. And what he finds is that there's this bucolic race of, blonde-haired, blue eyes, white folk, no people of color whatsoever, on top of the ground, eating fruit and, playing in the water and having sex, and that's pretty much all they do. And this one girl falls into the water, and she gets, almost drowned, and he jumps in and saves her. And everyone just kind of looks at her like, when she's going down the river, he can't believe that no one's going to jump in. So he does, and he saves her. And when he pulls her out, she's coughing, he pats her on the back. She gets up and she goes and plays ball with the rest of the kids, and without even thanking him, right? And that's kind of where we are, gang. We are bucolic cows. We're bovine. That's what these guys. They were bred to be the food stock of the underground troglodytes. And he's there a few weeks. He meets a girl he likes. She likes him. They start. He asks her a question. I love it how everyone there could speak English. 5,000 years into the future. Anyway, so he. This horn blows, and everyone just goes into a hypnagogic state, turns around and walks towards this cave and walks in. And he's trying to ask his girlfriend, so what's going on? She's like, and goes into the cave. And then, the horn stops going off, and they, turn around and go back playing ball. Anyway, so he, kind of goes and looks for his time machine because he's kind of getting sick of this, and it's gone. And he kind of hit it, but it's gone. So he asks, the bovine where it is. They don't even know what he's talking about. And so he decides that he should go down in the cave and check it out. He goes down there, and there's a technological society down there. And they're basically vampires. They've been living underground for the last 5,000 years, so they are whiter than white. And there's his time machine. And the head, vampire guy is saying, so, yeah, they're talking. And he goes, maybe we can use your machine and take a few of us back and get some more healthy, because, the bovine that we got they're not as tasty as they used to be. Anyway, that's where we are, And I've worked on underground facilities. When I was at Cornell at Ithaca, I got there because I had, in the 80s, came back. New York was no longer the place That was my town. And thousands, millions of apartments that had been rent controlled had basically been redlined and, crack. Poppy, who worked at the, you know, um, dress factory, would get his check on Thursday, give it to mommy. She ran the house, paid the bills. Friday was Poppy's day to evening to play dominoes with the boys, drink some rum, smoke some hooch. And then crack showed up. And they, oh, let's try this. They try it. And now the problem with crack, it's not like marijuana. It's not even like heroin or cocaine, meaning you can get off those things. Crack, a certain percentage of the people who tried it first time, that's it, they were gone. So a whole portion of that working class community in New York walked away from their families. Mommy couldn't pay the bills. She was thrown out on the street. And the city did nothing because they had been bankrupted in the 70s. And it was the perfect storm for guys like Trump to just take up everything. And he wasn't the only one. People from the Japanese, everybody was investing. Real estate's a good investment. Anyway, when I saw all this, I had some friends, and I said, "Hey, forget art, because when I came back from the '70s, early from Los Alamos and San Dias in like '73, '74, I said to I was an artist. I was one of the first people in Soho, and I got a lot of photos from that time, which I'll show you. But I said to my friends, listen, nuclear weapons, nuclear power, this is going to be the end of us. Like tomorrow, we got us, Donnie, Ronald Reagan wants to put these missiles in Germany, right on the doorstep of Russia. Russia will have no time to know what's going on. And that happened. The Norwegians have their own little space guy, sending up rockets. And they do it off the coast there, right next to Russia. Now they have a whole protocol where they send them, say, hey, we're going to do this on this time, and look at the data, blah blah blah. Well, Russia was falling apart, so nobody read the letter. So when their radar saw a missile shooting off the coast of Norway, they were like, that was more obsolete than ours. They hit the button, nothing happened. Now you could say something happened, but anyway, we started a group called, the anti-nuclear movement, No Nukes. We Ad Busters, which became the Occupy movement. And my wife of the time, Donna Ann, she's a Cancer, and so she wanted a little house with a picket fence out in Long Island near her family. So, dutiful guy. I went out and got myself a master's license out there and went about doing it. And bumped into the fact that Long Island Mining Company was building a nuclear power plant right on the edifice of Tesla's Wardenclyffe, which was his first industrial after coming back from Colorado Springs and identifying all of the mysteries of the universe. He was ready to give humanity free electricity and abundant food and any material things they wanted. And due to the economic crash of the 1890s, Mr. Morgan pretty much bought up all technology at that time for a penny on the dollar. And that's how General Electric was invented. And why does General Electric make everything from toaster ovens to nuclear weapons to jet engines to rocket ships? Is because Mr. Morgan bought up everything and owned it. And so when Tesla, and Morgan, paid him, okay, go ahead, Nick, give that a try. And soon as Nick showed in an industrial sense that this could be done, Morgan had it torn down and gotten rid of. And the if you go out to, I don't know what's out there in Long Island, but when I was out there in the early 80s, and I was going, this, no, 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 this, no. After doing all the no nuke stuff, I said, and the Price-Anderson Act guarantees every utility $16 for every dollar they invest in nuclear power. They don't have to they don't have to get that first dollar from their investors. They can get it from the ratepayers, and they are only held liable to $50 million to an accident. Anything over $50 million, makes 3 Mile Island, it didn't even kill anyone, and it cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Chernobyl cost, was one of the things that bankrupted Russia. It cost, hundreds of billions of dollars. And we have over 100 of these, all dotted all over the United States. And they were built they were supposed to be shut down in the 80s. But Ronald Reagan wrote executive orders. And pretty much every president since then, George H., Billy Bob, Jimmy Carter, they all signed on for this. And our nuclear power plants are out there, meaning if Al Qaeda really wanted to screw with USA, they allegedly, their flight plan of the radar signature of the 2 planes that hit the World Trade Center, it went right by Indian Point. And that was one of the first nuclear power plants built in the United States. And that was supposed to be built in Manhattan, right where Soho is. Con Ed had bought all that property up to put a nuclear power plant. And not only that, to dump the steam, because back in the day of Edison, he couldn't transmit his current more than 6 miles. And that's why New York City has steam pipes everywhere, because they had, gigantic steam boiler, and they would pump the steam, which wouldn't lose any horsepower, that 6 miles have a generator, or 20 miles, right? And so that's why everything from the Battery to about 60th Street has steam pipes all over Manhattan. And once they turned everything to AC, they still had the steam pipe, so they then sold the steam to apartment buildings and factories and things of that nature. And so Con Edison wanted to take the excess heat that normally have a cooling tower. They were going to pump that into people's radiators in their apartments, radioactive water to keep your house, so Johnny would be glowing. Anyway, so Jose, this not, So I got, there was this thing called the Shad Alliance, and they were having a meeting about the Shoreham plant. So I went to that meeting, and there were about 100 people there. And they basically, it was like a joke, because there was every kind of group that had their own special interest, and they wanted to tag onto the issue of Shoreham, So I looked around, and there was this one group of grandmas, and they were like disgusted and didn't understand what was going on, and so they said, I went over and said, "So girls, where are you from?" "Oh, we're from Shoreham." We're just, and this woman, Marge Harrison, had kept. Ilko wanted to build 30 nuclear reactors, so it wasn't going to cost them any money. And this one woman had kept a multi-billion-dollar corporation owned by J.P. Morgan, a bank, and Mr. Rockefeller, and it kept them at bay. And so they only got one license, and that was where they were doing it, Shoreham. So where I lived was not too far from there, maybe 6 miles. I lived in the Mauritius. So I said, "Okay, girls, why don't we have lunch?" March, why don't we go at your house on Wednesday? Is that good for everybody? Yep, went there. There were 6 grandmas. And I said, forget Shad Alliance. What we need to is have our own organization. It has to be exactly, if we want to stop this plant, we have to call it the Stop Shoreham campaign. Simple, at that time, Shoreham and Illico was paying everyone's electric bill within 15 miles of the plant. All their electric bills, their taxes, their school, so everybody in that neck of the woods loved them. Anyway, long story short, it took us 5 years. We did everything, and I got the nom de plume of the Minister of Fun because it was a real drag to have to. Everyone hated us. Everyone thought we were commies, and we had to drag a million people into what was really going on, which we did. When we started having large campaigns, we had 60 to 100,000 people show up in front of the plant, right? Mario Cuomo's the key because he was in charge of health and safety of the state. So wherever he went, we had, 5 to 1,000 people in his face with signs about Shoreham. Anyway, long story short, the plant was built by the mob. It was totally substandard. They used concrete for the containment building that, Suffolk County refused for curbs because they got a good deal on it. And the plant, the reactor core itself was something that was going to be sold to the Shah of Iran. But, when that fell apart, it was moved into there. And the building was too small, but they just shoved the sucker in there. So everything was Rube Goldberg, totally a mess. And I had worked in that industry, like I said, Los Alamos, Sandias, Kirkland Air Force Base. So I had quite the pedigree. And I was a filmmaker at that time. And I went to local and said, listen, here's who I am. I want to tell your story. And they said, oh, that's great, yeah. So they gave me carte blanche to go in the plant. And instead of putting me in front of the camera, I put my mother, who was, tall and beautiful and brilliant, and she looked like a queen. She always looked like a queen. Every hair was in place. As I'm looking like this, I'm the antithesis of my mother. Anyway, and she was sharp, and she knew what was, I've been telling her what the story was, and she kind of, had the 411. And so as we were walking through, she just looked at what a mess it was and said, you can't be building something this important and be so messy. And she went over to the refrigerator. In the refrigerator was bottles and bottles of vodka and cans of beer. And every refrigerator that, as we walked through, opened it up, it was full of vodka and beer. And she goes, she went on. And then we started looking at the control room and all of the trays. They don't. There's so many control wires that they don't have pipes. It's trays. And she looked up there, and they were all the same color. They were all red. She said, "How can you know which wire is which?" Oh, we know. We mark them. Yeah. So, bottom line, I took this film and I sent it to the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and this plant was one of the first to be streamlined in its licensing process, and it was so off the hook that they started having hearings about it, right? And then people started to hear what was going on. And I was staying, I said, we have to be like Wilco. We have to have our own Wilco, Long Island life community. And we were in front of that plant for 3 years, 24/7. And the day I started it not too well. And I had 3 of the more hardy young folk of our community, and it was sleeting, and it was Valentine's Day. We started on Valentine's Day, and we were all we had was garbage bags. That's all I had in my truck, was garbage bags. So we got our melting cardboard signs, and we're on the side of 25A, which is pretty large. It's really only at that part of eastern Long Island. There's 25A, Sunrise Highway, Long Island Expressway. That's it, right? And about 500,000 people live to the east of Shoreham. So there were basically, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lanes of highway to get 500,000 people off the island. And it's an island. It's totally surrounded by water. Atlantic Ocean on one side, the Long Island Sound on the other. And we wanted to show the insanity of this and by our intent and commitment. So we're that first day we're out there, and a limo drives by, right? And he stops, backs up, window goes down. He goes, "What are you guys doing out here?" And we tell him the 411 because we got it down. And the guy totally freaks out. He goes, "Man, I'm living just 3 miles from here." And I said, "Buddy, you're a dead man walking." And that was Billy Joel. And that day, a truck shows up with a wedding tent. And he had bought, an acre next to where we were standing and stuck the tent on it. I don't know if he bought it or rented it, but he had that property and he put a wedding tent on it. He dropped 6 Lazy Boy recliners. And whenever he could on a Friday, he would come and play, and we would have, he would tell us beforehand, and we would advertise, and that was a great draw. People come hear Billy Joel play there, Mr. Piano Man, and they would donate, and he donated a lot. So he was our first amazing major angel, and I don't even know if he would opt to say whether he did that or not, because he kept, other than performing, he kept a pretty down low thing about it. Anyway, so long and short of it, we just kept at it, right? And kept having a good time and kept having Friday parties and getting more and more people aware of what was going on. And so as the time grew near, the NRC said, "No, we're not going to give a license. This is like, forget about it." They try to turn this thing on. It's going to kill everyone. No, we can't do that, because these guys really believed in nuclear power, and they didn't want this terrible thing to besmirch nuclear power. So Ronald Reagan, under the tutelage of George H., just kept signing executive orders to overrun the NRC and whatever, we won in the Supreme Court 3 different times. And, Ronnie just signed executive order. And none of this got major play. The only news that we could get out was there was the Eastern Long Island penny saver. And the guy hated Wilco because I kept jacking his electric bill up. So when we went to him, he said, "I'll put anything you want." So he did. And he used to give that paper away because he would charge for the ads. And within 4 or 5 months, people started saying, "Well, where can I find out about this?" And penny saver was the only one. So he started charging a quarter. And then when more and more people wanted, he charged them 50 cents, and then $1, and then $2, and then $3, $5 was the highest he got. And he would give us half the money that he made. And this is what I'm talking about, gang. Nothing is lost. You can, if you keep at it and keep your heart high. And that was, again, I was known as the minister of fun, because yes, I would go out and put people together, but when we would do things, I always made sure that everyone got fed, that everyone felt good, that no one was overworked, that we were a team and not just the hero. Anyway, so as we go along, we win every battle and lose in the war terribly, because they have total control. They can just sign executive orders willy-nilly, whatever they want. And but we don't give up. Oh, people go, "You guys are crazy. You can't fight City Hall. You can't do rah, 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 rah." But we just kept at it because we were a family. We were a community. We were expanding. We really got Eastern Long Island. And they wanted to burn Wilco to the ground by the time this came around. Especially when the hearings started going and people jammed those things. And I had a radio show on CW Post radio station, and I would, use it nonstop and I finally got kicked off the radio station because of my show was called Art and Technology with Val DiMartino. Yeah, I knew a lot of artists all around the world, Yes, they came. They loved to come visit me because I had this beautiful little thing on the Great South Bay, and they would come and talk about art, and we had loads of fun. And then I had scientists because I had worked at Los Alamos and San Diego, and a lot of them were at Brookhaven. I had a brilliant girlfriend at the time, Christine Barton, who's invented the 21st century. If you ever see a Pixar movie, that little lamp, she was the first human being to render 3 dimensions in digital space. All your video games with 3D, all the, you know, you know, stuff you see in movies. Thank you, Christine Barton. And then she went from there to over where I always forget the name of this place, but it was on Long Island Sound between where was it? Kind of between Old Brookville and a little further Brookhaven. I'll say that. And it was this big old estate, and this guy got $100 million to sequence the human genome. And he said, well, it's going to take 50 years. So the federal government gave him 100 mil. And Christine said, I think I can write an algorithm and make a little machine that'll do it a lot quicker. I want X amount of money. She had worked for GE and got they gave her a lot of money for what she did for them, but not what it was worth. Anyway, so these guys said, okay, sure, we'll give you this much up front for you to do your research, and then if you do it, we'll give you this much. Anyway, they didn't expect her to do it because she was a woman, Anyway, of course, the woman who discovered DNA, because she was doing the X-rays of the cells, she got very little credit and died of ovarian cancer from X-ray exposure, whereas Crook and Cripp, they got all the stuff. But anyway, so Christine does this, and she makes an algorithm machine that actually sequences the whole human genome within the context that they were looking for within a year. And she got her little paycheck, and she's gone on from there to there. She is one of the major influences in what is known as transhumanism. And she has kind of disappeared, And she was another great light in my life, brilliant. And, no man ever, she couldn't stand men because they were chumps and morons and always trying to steal from her and cheat her. And the first, 10, 15 years of her scholarly life as a scientist, that's what happened. But then she met me, and I said, baby, don't even go there. Play these people because they're trying to get over on you. The best, the person easiest to get over on is a corrupt person. And that's why politicians are so easily turned, because they're so corrupt. And Donnie was put there, Donnie Chump was put there because he is a chump. And he's set up, they're not going to, drag him out, what do they call it, defrocked or whatever, the 25th Amendment. No, he's going to be indicted. Ow. And, Russia isn't a country. They're like the mob, so he's been hooked up with those guys for at least 20 years. He's like Fredo. But if you do not give up, you do not lose your heart, you have faith, forget belief, but faith in here. That's where this can work out. So there we were, the day before they're supposed to turn this thing on, right? And we have we've won every battle. We have totally, like Eastern Long Island is like a hornet's nest, really pissed off about this. And we put a blockade around it so they couldn't bring in the fuel rods in a highway. They had to bring it in on the water, and the people were out there in the boats trying to block them bringing it on the water until the Navy, U.S. Navy, came and said, "Listen, kids, get out of the way, or we're going to run you over or blow you out of the water." So they kind of had to. So they fueled the plant, and they were going through the make believe of following the NRC regs. So they had to do a safety test and a low power test. So the day before they're going to start this process, we had a dirge, like a killer party. Very, what you saw for Aretha, it's kind of what we were. We were just partying down, right? This is like 1980, somewhere between 4 and 6. Anyway, I'm sitting in my Lazy Boy recliner, and I'm with this, she was a Maryknoll nun. And I don't know if any of you remember, under Jimmy Carter, he sent the CIA when we were getting into the wars in Central America over cocaine. Jimmy sent in the CIA, the Contras, and murdered this because this group of nuns who gave up the monkey suit 30 years ago and wore street clothes because that was a better way for them to interact with the public. And the Maryknolls were all about peace. There are a number. There's the Jesuits, the Franciscans, who are like the CIA and the NSA. But there are a number of Christian Catholic groups that were like Jesus was doing liberation theology. Anyway, so the Maryknolls are very much like that. And when I was a young lad, which is a whole nother story, I kind of got beat up by a nun to the point where, my jaw, this side of my mouth is, messed up, and why I've lost a good deal of my teeth. And this eye here, and she brought the eye orbit, broke that. And she broke my wrist and my arm. And when my mom came down to, the head nun said, your son's caused a big ruckus, you need to... And there I wasn't even in the nurse's office. I was like slumped in a chair unconscious. And the head nun said, well, we're going to, ambulance is going to show up soon and take your son to a Catholic mental institution because he is obviously... And my mom said, no, you beat the ever-living out of my son, and I'm taking him to the emergency room, and I'm going to then call our lawyers. Anyway, so I was sent off to the Maryknolls, who were peace-loving. So I had a great respect and place in my heart for the Maryknolls and other, like Thomas Merton was another mentor of mine, because Thomas Merton was a Methodist, and my mom ruled court in New York City in the 30s, and because she ran Roosevelt Hospital. Now, her name wasn't at the top, but she was like, this Irish-German, unbelievable, brilliant person. And so all these rich guys whose names were on there, who were just there through nepotism, let her run it because it made them look good. Anyway, there was no money, but she knew how to get a favor. And anyway, long story short, she got this amazing apartment that she brought her brothers and sisters to get, and got them jobs in Macy's and places like that, because there was no work anywhere in their little town upstate New York. So she'd have these cocktail parties where she'd wear evening gowns and just have the richest of the rich guys flying around her. And none did that to me. And why she did that was, the school we went to was at the, in the shadow of the Empire State Building. And during the, the Red Scare, Cold War, we'd have like, get under our desk, duck and cover, right? We had this big gigantic window that faced the Empire State Building, right? And I'd never get under and the nuns said, get under the table. I said, no, sister. Get under the table. I said, sister, listen, that's the Empire State Building. The Russians are going to hit it with 4 or 5 hydrogen bombs. We will be turned into atoms. And somehow, somewhere, that was like her deepest fear, like burning in hell. That was like, what she thought it was. And I might have said that it would be just like burning in hell. And that's when she lost her cookies and beat the ever living snot out of me, right? Just for saying that, right? But that has been one of my great gifts and one of my, what do you call it? Crosses to bear. I can't shut up. I've learned to be diplomatic, but I can't stop speaking truth to power. Now, luckily for me, power appreciates it because I've learned how to ameliorate it to the point where they can listen, and but not to this nun. Anyway, so that's how I ended up with the Maryknoll priests, and they kind of, really gave me an amazing education. First, second, third grade, I was like reading Latin. Anyway, and they were great. They were loads of fun, and anyway, so there I am, 1986 or somewhere there, and they're about to fuel the Shoreham nuclear power plant, and it's Sunday, and they're going to start this process Monday, and I am in the lazy boy recliner, and I got a chicken leg in one hand and a spliff in the other, and I am, when I'm taking a bite of the chicken leg, I hand the spliff over to the nun, and she puffs on it, and then we're going back and forth, and we're getting pretty baked there, and it's a beautiful day. It's a spring day, and it's a beautiful day, and very similar to the beautiful day in September when 9/11 happened. And I'm looking out across the Long Island Sound, and from Connecticut is this black cloud. It's a black speck at first, but it is shooting straight for us at amazing speed. And I go, Mary, what? Mary Boylan, Mary Kelly, Mary something. I said, Mary, what is that? And she goes, oh, I don't know. And we dropped our chicken bones, and we're just passing the spliff back and forth, looking at this. And all of a sudden, this gigantic cloud gets closer and closer and stops right on top of the power plant. And it hits it with lightning bolts. Right, more than you could count. And there was no rain, just lightning bolts. Blacker than black cloud. And where we were, a quarter mile away, it was still sunny. You were just watching this going, oh my God, look at that. Bang, bang, bang. It must have hit it 100 times or more, right? And then the cloud kind of dissipated and went away. And was, what the heck is that? But, we went back to, drinking more booze and smoking more spliffs and eating more chicken legs and dancing and just having a good old time. And we didn't leave. We just danced on into the night and just, fell down. The lucky ones got into the, Easy Boy recliners. The rest of us were strewn on the ground. So the next morning, we stuck around because we were going to get in front of the gate, and because there'd be TV cameras and we were going to be there, right? So we're out there in front, and all of a sudden, it's about, I don't know, 10 in the morning, 11, something like that. All of the you're dead sirens. They had all these, if there's an accident at the reactor, these things are going to blow. And they start wailing. And we go, oh, they're testing the horns out. No, because they were speakers, and not only were they, a voice could come over. And I said, this is not a test. There's an anomaly occurring at the plant. Everyone should evacuate. And they were basically talking about the guys in the plant, right? But we heard it because we were right on the other side of the gate. And the news guys heard it, and they're like, how the heck do we get out of here? And they were there because, the TV guys were only there when something good happened to the plant because, Mr. Rockefeller and Mr. Morgan's bank owned those TV. And NBC, built, GE built the reactor. Anyway, so they're like, oh, my God. Anyway, and we're looking at each other going, well, we told you so. So we we have someplace to go. I drive to the other side of Long Island, facing the Atlantic where the wind is blowing. So, unless it really blows up like a nuclear explosion, I'll be relatively safe, you know. And I have a friend who's got a boat who's a fisherman who goes out into the Atlantic. So we already have made, you know, plans that if this occurs, we're heading to Ireland because he could go to Ireland. His boat was big enough. Anyway, so, you know, that goes. Plus, I knew all the police because I had organized the police because I went to every police department and I brought this guy. He was the guy who invented nuclear health physics during the Manhattan Project. Dr. Gough Whitman, I think. And Michio Kaku was a student of his, right? So if you know Michio, he's cut from that cloth. Anyway, and I got to know Michio really well. He came to whenever could call him up because the other guy was up in Boston, but Michio was I think at NYU, so he would come to anything I called him up for. So, you know, we went to all the police and said, "Listen, kids, this is what's going to happen if there's an accident. You know, everyone is going to be irradiated. You guys are going to be out there in the crowd trying to keep order. You're going to be the first to die. You're not going to be there to get your family off the island, so they're going to be scared and stuck in their little houses. They'll be the second to die. So you can either look at all the evidence we got here. We're not trying to snow you. This is what it is. And hey, listen, let's all go over to Brookhaven because Brookhaven was very upset about this. They didn't want Shoreham to open. They never made any real public announcements about that, but within side of their own little bailiwick, they did. And when we brought every police force over there, you know, and that's how I learned about the Montauk Project because I was trying to prove that we didn't need the Shoreham Power Plant. So I went and got the New York Power Authority's records at you know electric usage, and it was plain to see that we didn't need that sucker, and Luco was only going to make money at selling it off the backs of the people of Long Island. And as I did that, I saw one place used ungodly amounts of electricity, and it was out in Montauk, which is this little speck of a town. Nothing goes on down, at least then. And I was, what the heck is this? And the second biggest usage was Brookhaven because they had a big cyclotron there. So I went over to those guys and found an old guy who was back from the Tesla days and knew my mentor, Grandpa Stahl, and they had turned half of Eastern Long Island, RCA did anyway, into a phased array radar. You know, they were trying to, you know, make radio work and they were like overpowering and you know. Anyway, and Tesla kind of got involved because they had all this equipment which they couldn't make work, and he wanted to talk to the other side. Anyway, so this guy told me that had been experiments since Wardenclyffe with time travel. I said, what? And he goes, oh yeah, time travel, because one of the anomalies of the stuff we did in the 1890s was these torsion fields. Now, they're not torsion like on your car, but they're named after it. And it spun space-time up and still does. Like you go to a big hydro dam and they got these big generators, and the areas around where the armatures are like, don't go there because these torsion fields are created there. And very weird things occur. So, you know, so I went out to Montauk and went to the chief of police there and said, I had all the, you know, New York State Authority power documents there. And I said, so who's using electricity like this? And he goes, well, no one in our town. But he then pulls out his records. He's, you know, I've been police chief here 20 years. And for the first 6 years, never, you know, I never gave a parking ticket. Never, you know, nobody did anything. You know, this was a boring town. But then people started murdering each other. And then he says, look at this. And he said, there is no rhyme or reason, but at certain times, great amount of murder and mayhem goes on in the little village of Montauk. And I took out the New York State Power Authority utilization, and they went straight to when tremendous amounts of electric current were being used in Montauk, these murders occurred. We were both like, "Woo, this is very strange." So I said, "Okay, let's get in your police car and let's drive around and let's look. Do you know where the power lines?" "Oh yeah, yeah." So we went and looked at and they had gigantic 980 lines going into this abandoned military site that had been abandoned like in the 60s. But these power lines were like not too old. And they went over to where they went into Brookhaven, where Brookhaven had these power lines coming not through Long Island, but through Long Island Sound from New England. So these 980 lines are big enough to have enough electricity for 1 million people. So we went, he's the police chief. He can go where he wants to go. So we go to this abandoned military radar site on the Atlantic Ocean. And we don't quite break in, but we break in, and we're snooping around, and it's like the biggest radar antenna I had ever seen. And I know about microwave and radar, and I had a friend who was one of the starters of the RAD lab in Tuxedo, New York. And anyway, so the horn on that sucker was bigger horn than I had ever seen. I mean, like, and a horn is that thing that propagates the 5G. This was before 5G. Anyway, and that's what it did, and it whacked everyone out so much that they went off and killed their husbands and wives and everybody else. And so So we're there just, I don't know, less than an hour, and these black SUV, they weren't SUVs, but they were black, vehicles show up, these guys in black suits, and they say, "Who are you guys?" And he goes, I am the law of this county, so step back, buddy. And they said, "Well, we have authorities higher than you, but, we're not going to do anything other than to say you have to leave right now." So we did. And he and I became great buds, and he got very involved in the Stop Shoreham campaign, as did every police force all the way to Nassau County. Every time we did a big rally where we'd have 20, 30, 50,000 people there, and we had the state county courts not going on, going on to Lilco's private property down to less than a parking ticket. And they brought a trailer to the site when we did these events. And once we went over the fence, and Don, Ronald Reagan, Dick Cheney, and George H. Had FEMA pass a executive order saying that, okay, this is national security. We're going to put this red line. You cross that red line, we're going to shoot you, period. That's it. Don't come any further than this. Anyway, we had the Suffolk County police and every other police force there, and they didn't have quite SWAT teams yet, but close to it, and in their black uniforms and riot gear, and basically said with their megaphones, "Listen," and they had these guys on top of their trucks with the M16s, their sharpshooters. They said, "You shoot the kids, we're going to shoot you." And there's no more, making you feel good about your local government than the police backing you up with an M16. But none of this got on television. This was pretty, 50,000 people, and we would get cars out of junkyards and get them to roll enough to go on every major, Long Island Expressway, Northern State, Sunrise Highway, and we'd have them full of tires, and we'd have a truck or two with us, and we'd, put tires all around them and set them on fire and walk away. And we would stop traffic, and we basically said, this is what it's going to look like for an accident, this kind of traffic jam. And the cops were not, we didn't make an agreement, but they were over, doing, we'll shoot you if you shoot the kids. They were not out with the traffic because neither, cops would not be there with the 500,000 people trying to get off of Long Island, east of Shoreham. All of Long Island at that time had close to 3 million people on it. Then you had to think about New York City with 17 million people. Shoreham was only 28 miles as the wind blew to New York City. So anyway, so they Monday comes, they do the test, and the horns go off. Get out, get out. Long story short, what happened was those lightning bolts degaussed the magnets of the backup generators, and one of the first things they did was to simulate a scram, and that's when the reactor goes down, no longer makes electricity, and they need a backup. And that's what happened in Fukushima. Those morons in Japan didn't put their generators above where the water was. So when they had a typhoon come through, it washed out all of their controls and their backup power. And then the reactors had no coolant, so they melted down, and the billions of gallons of water that were there in the system turned into hydrogen and oxygen. And that's what, when you saw pictures of the Fukushima reactors blowing up, it was the hydrogen and oxygen blowing the buildings up, right? And also the core. It really damaged, like those reactors have not really, they're still spilling nasty stuff into the Pacific, which is covering all of the North Pacific, Canada and Washington, and I mean, if you ever go up there, back in the day, that was unbelievably beautiful. Now it's all it is rocks and sand. They used to be anemones the size of cars, and this is what's going on in our plant across the board. I remember being on a ship. I tried to get back to America from Australia, and was going to take be a shipman. And a friend of mine said, well, you should check that out before you sign up, because once you're out there, you're going to be out there for a long time. You may like it. So I went out there on another ship, and we came across one of these plastic islands that was half the size of Texas, and this is in 1978. And you could smell it before you could see it, because all these fish and birds had eaten the plastic, and the ocean was covered in dead everything. And that was 1977. It's like 77, 87, 97. Almost 40 years. It is 1,000 times worse. And there were Australians really had no respect for anything except money. And not the Australian people, but the people who ran Australia, which were the the guy, Jack the Ripper. He wasn't just some crazy dude. He was Queen Victoria's cousin, who was her doctor. And as long as he was slitting the throats of whores, not so bad. But when he started going after the middle class, they couldn't just hang him or say, hey, this is the guy. They took him to Australia, which is like putting someone on Mars, And everyone who runs Australia, their families go back to that lineage of crazy motherfucking wacko people from England. Mad dogs in England. Anyway, so when they turned on the backup generators at the Shoreham plant, and those magnets in the generators were degaussed, it fried every frigging wire in that plant. It was just puddles of copper and plastic. So there was no control over anything. It went dark. Luckily, they did not. The core was fueled, and it was cracked, meaning to start the chain reaction, they put in this chunk of a neutron emitting material, and they crack the reaction. But it didn't, it was at 0.004% of chain, at the lowest level of chain reaction, to then once you pull up the control rods and take the borium out of the environment down there, that's when it starts to cook. And anyway, so Mr. Rockefeller and Mr. JP basically said, well, hey, listen, we got the Price-Anderson Act. We'll just tear everything out and rewire it and turn it back on. And that's when Mario Cuomo actually stood up as a human being. He said, nope, sorry. These people have been in my face for the last 5 years telling me that this is going to happen. And it's happened. And only because he was a Catholic, only through the grace of God, we're still here. And I have the responsibility of the health and safety of the state of New York. And I am forcing Wilco out of business. The New York State Power Authority is going to buy Wilco. So they did. Closed it down, closed the reactor up as best as they could, and no one died. And it changed the economy. Grumman Aerospace left. All the military industrial guys who were there in a big way, left. And they said, oh, we're going to lose all these jobs. But 15 years later, all that property became where the yuppie stock folks wanted to live. And so, they have a better economy today than they had when the military industrial. And the military industrial jobs are not the panacea to making money. Anyway, so there we go. It's an hour 37. You heard a little of this, a little of that. Let's go look at the questions. Let's see. Well, bottom line about what Mr. Buddy Blindly says, the Nephilim, and again, I keep saying we're just an avatar. We're just a bag of water, right? Our souls are in somebody's, server somewhere. And the movie, The Matrix, was spot on. So we're in an illusion. Everything that we think is real, not really. So when I was a scholar, one of my salient graces as a scholar was I don't believe in anything. I wasn't schooled by the book. A lot of my fellow scholastics, I was a scholar, they were scholastic, would complain, why is he here? He's got no degrees. And then their bosses said, oh no, but he has studied with the most amazing people and he is published, whereas you aren't. And he has what you don't have, and that's an open mind. And I was being funded not by their university, but from some other entity who wanted to do X, Y, and Z research, and they would put me on that crew as the lone guy who would say, well, wait a minute, let's look at this a different way. And the people who had the money, which I didn't often meet, but knew of me and appreciated, again, my little salient grace of not believing in anything. So I was taken to Egypt to look at all of the artifacts that this one crew was digging up. And because I wasn't a I am a shamanic, psychosocial, cultural, forensic, anthropologic alchemist, and so shamanically, I look at everything as all our relations, from 9 generations in the future to 9 generations in the past, and everything, every bird, every plant, as part of my relations. So that is the context, the frame in which I start from. And then, psychologically, to understand someone's psychology, you have to understand, you just don't get it to DSM, you have to understand their social orientation, what they like, what their job is, all the above. Then you have to understand their cultural background, where grandma came from, what their holidays were like, what they ate when grandma cooked it for them. And then you have to forensically, which means, it's a Latin word that means you take things apart thread by thread. And that's how you get a bigger picture, not just at looking at the tapestry. And then anthropologically, what that is you're supposed to take off your prejudicial glasses and look at things as if you were wearing the grass skirt yourself. Right? And alchemy is the science of making base metals into gold, and not, turning zinc into gold bullion. No, the base metal is us. This ugly bag of water with trace elements in it. And through our golden thread to our Akashic record, that is the gold we're looking for enlightenment and then ascension. And that's what Jesus was. Jesus was an ascended master. Now, we have other masters who Buddha, and a number of other folk, and they are enlightened. And I am trying to be that. For shizzle. Yes, this is for shizzle, kids. But again, don't believe anything I tell you. I don't want you to believe in anything. I want you to have faith in yourself to be able to ferret this information out. Now, if you guys, any of you guys who say, oh, I want to learn this, learn that, I keep inviting you out into the deep woods. Because where I live in the depths of Appalachian poverty, surrounded by materialism's horrific, what's the word? Materialism. Boone, North Carolina, the whitest place I've ever seen. When I was lecturing there in the early 80s, it was a small state teachers college, like 1,100, now there's 18,000. And they're all hipsters, they're all there to ski. And then there's ETSU, which is quite a great school, in Johnson City. And that's Tennessee's Tech. And they have great departments. But again, they're quite scared. Every time I go visit over there, there are a few teachers there that are my friends, but the rest are scared. You're going to take my job? Oh, I want to be a tenured professor. No, I'm not ever being a tenured. I mean, I was at Cornell, and my boss said to me, Al, if you stop wearing your pajamas, come to a number of the, faculty cocktail parties, we'd put you in charge of the department because I'm going to retire soon and there's no one here even close that can take my place. You'd at least be amusing. And a number of people in higher places have said that. The rest of the school, not so much, Anyway, that's when I said, hey, I'm like, Groucho Marx, I'm not going to join any club that wants to have me in that. I mean, not really. I've always been in everybody's club. That's my real deal is I'm happy to join anybody's club, and at this time, I'm ready. A number of times I've been offered to join the club. I had a great mentor, George Christie, who put all of Intelsat together. He, again, was one of the guys at the Rad Lab. Brilliant guy. And he just really thought he loved me. I gave a speech at the UN about technology and how it should be the driver of freedom and not the driver of oppression. And, there was a lunch and I was sitting at a table all by myself. I was like the lone kid. All the cool kids didn't want me, can I sit? No, nobody wanted to sit with me. And I was sitting over there and I was chomping away and I had brought like my grandma's Tupperware suitcase and I was like going through the buffet line and filling it up. And he walks up to me, goes, why don't we go sit down? I said, sure. And so he says something to somebody and they take my suitcase. He says, put that in the fridge for you. And they take me upstairs to that big, have you ever noticed how the UN building looks like the obelisk in 2001? It's not a coincidence. Anyway, he took me up to this unbelievable office, like on the whatever floor, 30th, 40th, 50th floor of that building, which was his. And he had a very nice little meal laid out that was way better than the, boiled chicken that I was sticking in my suitcase. And he had some very nice liqueurs and very nice coffees and very nice baked goods. You can have whatever you want. We started talking, and he actually knew me. He knew my pedigree, all the different places I had been. And he said, I know you know this because you're a scholar and you've studied this, that we're heading into a period of time of great stress for humanity. And there's a group of us who have seen the edges of this a number of times, old enough. I saw end of World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, all the craziness that's going on now. And we think a group of us have to prepare so parts of humanity can survive. And so he said, so did you ever hear of breakaway civilizations? And I said, no, I've read a little of this guy and a little of that guy, and I know that at the end of World War II, the German people were bombed into the Stone Age, and the Nazis basically took over the world. They run our government and everybody else's government, and this place here, and little I know, you're probably a Nazi. And he kind of chuckles and he goes, well, you have to realize that it isn't one thing or another. There are many factions. I go, okay, I kind of realize that. And he goes, and we would like you to be part of our faction. And I said, well, other people have invited me, and I need to get to know you guys. You can't just jump into bed with somebody, because that's quite a good idea. So for a good 6 years, he was my last mentor. And every 6 months or so, he would say, I'm not getting any younger, and I think you should, come in and meet the board and, take the secret oath. And, and I said, well, yeah, maybe, ask me another 6 months. Well, he didn't last that much long. He's 6 years and he was on death's doorstep. And, I went and saw him at he had a house on Fifth Avenue, not across the street, but almost across the street from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which he was on the board. He loved that place. And he was in his big bed, and his fifth young wife was, ushering me in, and I sat there, and he was still drinking away that really good stuff, and so we were drinking. He says, well, you can't really ask for another 6 months. Do you want to join or not? And I said, well, yes, George, you're going to slip away soon, and I'm right here for you. I'll always be right here for you. Battery is low. Oh, let's plug this boy in. Anyway, so he died, but when he died, he called me up and said, okay, I want you to just come see me the last time, and I want to introduce you to a few guys, and we'll see what happens. So I did, and basically I said, I'm not ruling you guys out. It's just I'm only 45. I still got some good years of where I can't really join your club because then I couldn't do the things I want to do. And I said, well, that's reasonable. That's okay, And they said, but the next time you see us, that's it. You either say yay or nay, and that'll be it. And I said, okay, I'm done with that. Well, I haven't seen them yet. So I hope you're watching. I hope you're one of the 7 guys, because, guys, I'm ready. Now. And my abilities and what I can do. And one of the things I want to do is to represent humanity from love's co-creation. And we've talked about this a great deal. And yes, you guys are all caught up in the minutia of physics and politics and finance and blah, blah, blah. But I know all that shit is just an illusion. What is that counts is our heart's love. And you folks who are watching, my family of adepts, if you want to learn any of this, you're not going to get it over because, have no real access. I have to drive 30 miles to put a few minutes up on my YouTube thing, right? I have to drive 30 miles just to make a phone call. So, but where I do live is beautiful. I am surrounded by Sawtooth Mountains. I don't even get radio. Late at night, I get skip of AM, but not FM, not TV, not the internet. There is no Wi-Fi. There's no cell because this is a 200 square mile of extraordinary Appalachian poverty. I mean, I can take you to places where there are kids running around in Pampers with expanded bellies. I can take you to places where kids have been chewing tobacco, so they've lost all their teeth at 16. Meaning, I'm almost 80 and I'm still got, half my teeth. I mean, these guys over here were knocked out by the nun at first grade. So the invitation is still there. Right now it's a perfect time. It's going to be beautiful the next 3 or 4 months. Once it hits November, it's going to be ridiculously cold. And my friends at NOAA tell me that these winters in this neck of the woods, I mean, like last year, we had this Arctic blast that nearly killed me. So if you got a warm place for me to stay, invite me and we can do the mystery school at your house. Or you can come up in the next 4 months and you spend a week or two, it'll change your friggin' life. And I'm going to last leave you with, so why did I stick with John and why is he still my friend? Because he needs a friend. And it is great training for me not to emotionally get entangled with his issues. Most people do. I don't. And that's good for me. And the other thing that keeps me alive, I have a lot of things wrong with me. And my doctors take care of me because they're freaking amazed I'm still alive. My orthopedics, I got no bones attaching my feet to my ankles. I used to wear metal braces and walk with a walker. Now I just walk around. I have a little kind of ace bandage, just so my trip or something, my foot doesn't just snap off. But I was kind and generous to John as a friend because whenever you do that for another human being, it makes your life amazingly better. Yes, he was trial. He was, getting thrown. But once after the third time he threw me, I said, okay, this is, I got to be able to sense when he was going to do it. So I semi-prepared. But it was great because it threw me out. And he did it at the most unbelievable times in snowstorms at, 3 a.m. Get out, I can't tell you, man, blah, blah, blah. And then I had to embrace universe's love. I'm waiting for the universe to love me with, $300 million from the lottery. That's my one, expenditure. But it was pretty amazing the 26 different adventures I had in that year. That was great because it was so different from being with Johnny Boy on top of the mountain. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Let's take a look at a few of the things you guys have said. Oh, you said a lot. Let's see. Can you turn down the ray? Okay, turn down to the ray. Got rid of that. And he knows about no nukes. Good. I'm glad of you. High Times Magazine had an unexpected effect on education. Yeah. Stuff, yeah. And everything has the unexpected experience. Jane Jones, all those thumbs up. Thank you, Jane. Buddy, you're buddy blind. I love you, buddy. I am not edified in the ways of YouTube lingo. So when you abbreviate stuff, I had no idea what the heck you're talking about. Henry Stewart Swerdlow, who was kidnapped and brought to Montauk. Well, yes. Matter of fact, I knew Al Bielek and Duncan and Big Boy. I knew all those guys. And but I stopped hanging that crew about 89 when I went to Cornell. And because and that's why and I dip my toe in the UFO world and all these conferencing stuff, especially when people invite me and pay my way. Some of these conferences cost thousands of dollars. I can't afford that. But I am, when I go to those things, still the minister of fun. Anyway, so pretty much everything, because Mr. You need to go look at the Tavistock Institute. These are the guys who invented mind control. Let's see, what else do you guys say? It's amazing you were there, Bob. The founding realization of mind control was a thing. Yeah, yep. My first realization was when I was at Duke, and this company called who are those guys? The real stone killers of the Navy. SEALs, those guys. Well, there was a company called the SEAL Team, a SEAL Corporation out of somewhere in California. And there was a number of people doing serious work on other dimensions of reality and psychology of that. And I was doing that in the Theosophical Society in New York. I was making sensory deprivation tanks, and that was real trip. And I got very good at making these tanks. I damped everything. I even put Faraday cages around them. You got in these suckers. None of your 5G, your five senses were working, and so you would contact other dimensions. So my first real experience with that stuff was at Duke in '68, and they wanted to understand this modality because they wanted to make super soldiers, guys who could get shot and just keep going, because they had studied Sufis, guys who stuck, swords through their cheek out the other side, pulled it out, and it would heal within an hour, stuff like that, which was like, hey, it's, they brought them in and put them in controlled environments and had them do their thing, and there it was. So I've been around this stuff a lot, and I've been around the most amazing people, and I had a great sensei, which means teacher, Japanese Shinto priest, who taught me how to breathe, how to cook, how to make a cup of tea, how to heal people, how to meditate. And everything, he said, everything revolves, how to bathe. Everything revolves around breathing. And so he basically was the guy who showed me how to meditate and navigate the other nether realms that I had experienced, but I just stumbled into. I hadn't really, learned how to navigate it. But I could teach you how to. And I did. If you guys go back to that, I don't know, it's probably the 70th or 80th YouTube I did at one of the last ones I did at the school where Johnny jumped in for the last half an hour, 40 minutes. I do a total guided meditation, which if you follow that, is a good primer for you to take over. Okay? 2 hours. So you guys who complain that I'm not doing long ones, here you go. Yeah, trying hard to block you. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Well, I have the weirdest cell phone, baby. But I don't care. I don't complain. I just keep moving on. Just keep soldiering on. Because bottom line is someone's gonna say, okay, Al, wanna bring the circus out onto the family. Good one. I'm there. Nope. Nope. Didn't stop us. Because we had faith. We had faith in each other and faith in love. And look what happened. Faith wiped out the reactor. And it made Mayor Cuomo step up to the military industrial complex. And they realized to fight that would have made too much noise. So they just kind of said, okay. And that's how you win. Mm-hmm. Half-breed. Yeah, we're all half-breeds. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I've met a lot of Sims. Oh, I have a really good story when I was in New Mexico. That'll be next time because that would take me a whole number 2 hours. I'll just give you a little spoiler. I got stuck in Albuquerque. I was dancing with the Robert Wilson Dance Company, and the show of Iran was going to give him $2 million to come dance. And I said, no, the guy's scum. And the rest of even my girlfriend got on the bus, and I got left in New Mexico. And I ended up in Santa Fe, and I was selling vacuum cleaners, Kirby vacuum cleaners, right? And the guys selling it were real scum because they would, market to people on welfare. And when they signed the contract for the Kirby, they signed away their welfare check. And Kirby got it, and and it was only a tenth of what needed to be paid for the vacuum cleaner. And then they came. Not only was their welfare check taken away from them, they also took the vacuum cleaner. And they had like 30 vacuum cleaners. They never got any newer ones, and they had been doing that scam for years. And anyway, so I was out and about. And I was a demonstrator. I got $5 for every yellow. I was a yellow card guy, and I was really desperate, so that was my job. And I had a place to stay, and but I, had no money. So I'm telling the story fast, but I'll tell the whole story because it's pretty amazing. And so anyway, the guy who dropped me off, and I took the job because. First thing, we went to McDonald's, I got breakfast, and then at lunchtime they'd go for the Big Mac, and I was addicted to the secret sauce. So he goes, okay, go, we're going to this neighborhood, go down this street, go over there, and then go up there, and then I'll meet you over there. And I said, fine. And for some reason, I went in the direct opposite direction into the more affluent neighborhood. And I didn't just stop at any old house. I just kind of walked with my little Kirby suitcase, and I looked at this one house and went up, hit the doorbell, bing bong, and this unbelievable sex goddess answered the door. And she was completely naked except for a diaphanous little teddy that just was about 6 inches above her knee. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she goes, and it was like, 9 a.m. She goes, would you like a cocktail? And I did this with my eyes. I said, sure. Anyway, I walked in, and she goes, do you like to smoke marijuana? And I said, sure. And she had the most high-tech Star Trek bong I had ever seen, right? And it was like a hookah. Right, and just when you pulled on it, it made it lighted, and it was just great. Right, and she had these cocktails, slushy cocktails that I don't know what she put in them, but it sure made me want to explore underneath that diaphanous little teddy. And she then, after we sat there and we didn't even say anything, we just drank and tugged on the hookah, and she goes, "Would you like to kiss me?" And I said, "Yep." And she got next to me, and boy, did she have a tongue on her. And we went at it. We left our mark on every piece of furniture, every room, everything. And I don't know how long we were there, but all of a sudden, and we had drank, I don't know how many bottles of booze, but I was on another planet. And I didn't notice anything until this bottle hit me in the head. And I looked up, and there were these men in black and this white old gentleman who looked like an Aryan to me. And he had a really nice, the other guys had J.C. Penney suits. This guy had handmade tailored suit from not even America. And he looked at me, and the black guys were going to take me apart. And the young lady was going, "Father, what's wrong?" And he said, oh, I can't believe I can't remember this girl's name, but he said, "Go to your room," which she did. She just turned around, went into her room. And these guys, they were holding me in 20 different directions and about to just take me apart in pieces. And the elderly gentleman said, "Put the young man down and go outside. I want to talk to him." Anyway, we did. Long and short story, this guy was one of the head super duper Nazi scientists who had taken over our government. And he had built an artificial intelligence, and that was that girl. And he had told her to study human sexuality. And boy, did she ever. And that is just the little teaser I'm going to leave you with. It's now 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 17 seconds. And I'm going to wait till 27 and sign off, because I'm that kind of guy. Love you guys.